Om Namah Shivaya. Welcome back. So today, as we discussed last week, we will do a quick summary of chapter 6 of the Bhagavad Gita. Before that, please join me in the prayers. Om Gajananam Bhutaganadisevitam Kapita Jambo Phalasara Bhakshitam Umasutam Shokavinashakaranam Namami Vigneshwara Pankajam Shadananam Kumkumaraktawaranam Mahatim Divyamayurvahanam Rudrasya Sunum Sursainanatham Guham Sadaham Sharanam Prapadye Ya Kundendu Tusharahara Dhavala Ya Shubhravastavrita Ya Veena Varadanda Manditakara Ya Shveta Padmasana Ya Brahmaच्युतः Shankara Pratibhihi Devai Sada Pujita Sa Mam Patu Saraswati Bhagavati Nisheshajaryapaha Om Namah Shivaya Guruve Satchidanandamurtaye Nishprapanchaya Shantaya Shri Shivanandaya Te Namaha Shri Vishnudevanandaya Te Namaha Om Sarvamangalamangalye Shive Sarvardhasadike Sharanye Trayambake Gauri Narayani Namostute Narayani Namostute Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So today we are looking at the summary of the chapter 6 of the Gita, and as I said in last week's talk, this chapter is an expansion on the last few verses of chapter 5, which are basically the seed, the bija verses on which this chapter is based. This chapter deals with dhyanam, meditation. It's a very important sadhana for a spiritual seeker. So meditation is of two types, and we have two technical terms for them. One is upasana and one is nididhyasanam. Upasana is to be practiced before exposure to Vedantic teaching. That is, it's preparatory to upasana is preparatory to meditation. Excuse me 1 minute. Sorry, there was a little bit of disturbance. Okay, so upasana is a concentration exercise. It's a meditation exercise which we do before exposing ourselves to Vedantic teaching, before coming to Atmajnana. What is the purpose of upasana? Upasana prepares the mind for what we call Shravanam, listening to the scriptures. And how do we prepare the mind? Because when you sit down and when you listen to a discussion on the scriptures, what is most needed is a complete focus of mind, a concentration of mind. And we prepare ourselves by refining the mind to be able to be available to us whenever we want. As you know, the mind is usually has a will of its own. It goes wherever it thinks appropriate, and it takes effort not only for focusing on the scriptures, but to focus on any subject, you have to be able to get the mind to listen to you. And this is what upasana is supposed to do. And after this upasana, when your mind is relatively prepared, then you come to Shravanam and Maranam and Nididhyasanam, which jointly we call Jnana Yoga. And Jnana Yoga leads to Atma Jnanam, self-knowledge. Now, can a person who is not prepared with this kind of focus in mind, can he listen to Vedantic teaching? Of course. But he may get knowledge, but that knowledge will not act upon it. There is a purpose in Vedantic teaching. It is not to impart information. It is to bring about a transformation in your life. So an unqualified person listening to Vedantic teaching may get some knowledge, but there will always be a gap between what that person knows and what that person is. That is because the mind has not been prepared through upasana. Jnanam will take place, knowledge will take place, but the assimilation of the knowledge will not take place, and therefore the knowledge will not be available to us when we need it the most. It is the example, for example, you have a cup of coffee and then you put 1 spoon of sugar in it. The coffee does not become sweet simply by the act of putting the sugar, right? You have to stir the coffee. So the fact that sugar is present in the coffee is not going to make it sweet. And similarly, the fact that the knowledge is present in you is not going to make you a jnani. First, the stirring has to take place. What happens when you stir the sugar? The sugar mixes with the entire coffee. It gets dispersed completely in the coffee, and it is then difficult to separate the coffee from the sugar. Similarly, this knowledge which is present in your mind has to be assimilated completely. And this assimilation is what we call Nididhyasanam, Vedantic meditation. Therefore, Nididhyasanam is very necessary after Shravanam and Mananam. We defined Nididhyasanam as what? There is a process. Shravanam is getting the knowledge. Mananam is getting rid of any doubts about the knowledge. So after Mananam stage, you will have knowledge without doubts. But it is still not assimilated knowledge. So the doubtless knowledge will be there with you. But for complete assimilation, Vedantic meditation or Nididhyasanam has to be gone through. And therefore, we have 2 types of meditation. One is concentration meditation, where your mind is refined. Your mind is made available to you whenever you want it. And therefore, when you sit for Jnana Yoga, when you sit to listen to your teacher, your mind should be fully available to you. That is the main purpose of upasana, the concentration meditation, the pre-knowledge meditation, pre-jnana meditation. Once Shravanam has taken place, once Mananam has taken place, then you have knowledge free of any doubts. And then you do Vedantic meditation, which is called Nididhyasanam. The purpose of this Vedantic meditation is to make that knowledge completely available to you. So what is it? To put it in other terms, upasana, pre-knowledge meditation, is meditation upon a Lord with form. So you have the Shiva in front of you, or you have Krishna in front of you, and you are focusing on the form, and that is why you are using concentration. Your mind has to be focused, it has to be refined through that exercise of concentration. Once that is over, what is to be done? The knowledge is now available to you. Knowledge is without any doubts. And therefore, the teaching is available to you, but only when you are in the classroom. So this teaching has to be made available to you at every moment of your life. And therefore, dwelling upon the teaching which you have received, that is Nididhyasanam. You have to focus on the teaching till you and the teaching become one. So Nididhyasanam is not the cause of knowledge. Vedantic meditation is not the cause of knowledge, but Vedantic meditation is the cause of what we call Jnana Nishtha, the assimilation of the knowledge. And Jnana Nishtha is the cause of moksha, is the cause of liberation. So, Upasana gives what? Jnana Yogyata. The purity of mind, the focus of mind, the concentration of mind necessary for you to come and sit in the Bhagavad Gita class or in the Vedanta class. So that is called Jnana Yogyata, or called Chitta Shuddhi, or called purity of mind. Shravanam is listening to the teacher, that gives you knowledge. Mananam is getting rid of any doubts that you have about the knowledge. Nididhyasanam is the assimilation of the teaching. Now, generally whenever we say dhyanam or meditation, you can be referring to either upasana or to Nididhyasanam. It's a common word, dhanam, used for both. Now, chapter 6 deals with post-Vedantic knowledge meditation, post-Jnanam meditation. That is because if you look at what we have covered in the 5 chapters so far, we have covered Karma Yoga, Upasana Yoga and Jnana Yoga. The entire teaching of the scriptures has already been made available. Now what remains is the assimilation. So there is a sequence to the whole teaching, and this is how chapter 6 comes here. Since you have already got the knowledge, and now it is time for the digestion, for the assimilation. This chapter 6 can be broadly divided into 6 portions. So one is the general discipline, that is called Bahiranga Sadhanani, the general tools which you need in your life as a seeker. Then one is called Antaranga Sadhanani, specific discipline when you are sitting down for meditation. Then there is Dhyana Swarupam, the process of meditation. Then there is Dhyana Phalam, the benefits of meditation. Then there is Dhyana Pratibandha Pariharam, obstacles to meditation plus the solutions to the obstacle, the remedies to the obstacles. And there is one more topic, Yoga Brashtaha. What is the fate of the person who has not succeeded who has been a seeker in this life, who has done everything very diligently, but for some reason he has not been able to be successful in the sense, get moksha. So this first topic, Bahiranga Sadhanani, is covered in the first 9 verses and also in 2 other verses later, 16 and 17. 4 disciplines are emphasized. So Karma Yoga is part of the sadhana, but only a Karma Yogi can successfully practice meditation. Why? Because a Karma Yogi can accept everything, all actions with equanimity, the results of all actions with equanimity. He has no grumbling, he has no resentment. Why? Because he gives them all as an offering to the Lord. Ishvara Arpana Buddhi is there, and therefore there is no strain in his mind. Even if he is doing a lot of work, since the entire work is being offered to the Lord, there is no strain on the mind at all. And similarly, since he accepts all results that come from his work, all the results of his work, as the grace of the Lord, he accepts all the consequences of all his actions, which we call Ishvara Prasada Buddhi. He is not disturbed either when he is doing karma or when he is receiving the results of his karma. So Samatvam Yoga Uchyate, as we saw in chapter 2. His mind is not disturbed, he is without stress. There are no violent reactions, there are no undue reactions from this person, and this is the mark of a Karma Yogi. Violent reactions disturb the mind, and even if it has occurred in the earlier part of the day, when you sit for meditation, your mind will still carry part of the disturbance, and therefore it is important that the person who is sitting for meditation must have been having equanimity of mind throughout the day. And that this equanimity is provided through this two-pronged approach of offering everything to the Lord and receiving everything as a grace of the Lord. And that such a person is called a karma yogi. Then Krishna starts off with a small little verse. He says, Yam sannyasam iti prahuhu yogam tam vidhi pandava nahi sannyasta sankalpaga yogi bhavati kashchana. He says, hey Arjuna, remember that what they call sannyasa is karma yoga alone. Understand that. For without renunciation of expectations, nobody can become a karma yogi. So he's saying the main sannyasa required is sannyasa of the concerns of your mind, sannyasa of all those things which disturb the mind. Renunciation of all disturbances of mind is one of the main disciplines which a sadhaka needs to follow. And if you think about all the things that disturb your mind, you will realize that one of the main things is what? Concern about the future, which we call sankalpaha. Most of the time, our mind is disturbed because of sankalpaha, which can be thought of as planning, expectations, worrying about the future, and so on and so forth. Your mind is constantly engaged with either the past or the future. How can it therefore be available for you at the present? And so long as a person has not tackled that particular issue of the mind will not be available to you for the present. And the mind being available in the present is very important, because you are sitting for meditation, you are sitting for knowledge, everything is in the present only. And therefore for such a person, quality time is not available. So if a sannyasi cannot get freedom from worries about the future, he cannot get Atmagyanam, he cannot get self-knowledge. If a householder is worried about the future or the past, he also cannot get self-knowledge for this very simple reason that as long as we are worried about the past or concerned about the future, our mind is not completely available to us in the present. And the availability of the mind in the present is an extremely important part for self-knowledge for this sadhaka. And if you are a karma yogi, you have done exactly that. Karma yogi has given up worrying. He has given up resentment, he has given up worrying about the past, he has given up worrying about the future. So that is the basic mark of a sannyasi, says Lord Krishna. It doesn't matter what kind of costume he wears, whether he is wearing saffron or whether he is a businessman in a three-piece suit. If he meets the criteria of having given up worrying, sankalpaha, then he is a sannyasi. And that is why Krishna says, Nahi sannyasta sankalpaha yogi bhavati. If a person has to become a karma yogi, he has to have necessarily renounced sankalpa. He has to have necessarily renounced worry about the future, worry about the past. And therefore this karma yogi, Krishna says, can be called as a person who has renounced his worries. Sankalpa sannyasi. And such a karma yogi, says Krishna, is as good as a sannyasi. That is the first discipline which is required. Then, in the 5th verse he says, do not ever have a low opinion about yourself. Because if you are diffident, how would you be able to understand that you are the biggest thing in the universe, that you are the universe itself? And therefore if you are diffident, you have to inject confidence in yourself. How? By surrendering to the Lord. And Krishna says to Arjuna that it is our mind alone which is our friend, and it is the mind alone which is our enemy. A very, very important statement. It is the mind which is the cause of all problems. It is also the mind which enables us to come out of all our problems. How does one understand this? Depending on whether the mind has been trained, has been refined or not, the mind can be called either the friend or the enemy. A trained mind is your friend, because it is available to you whenever it is needed. An untrained mind is your enemy because when you need it most, it may not be available to you. Then, self-control. So, self-control means what? There is an instrument given to us for achieving this journey of our life. The instrument is the body, the mind, and the intellect, the sense organs. And as with any instrument, the instrument is useful to you only if it is well kept. In the case of the body, mind, and intellect, unless they are in my control, how can they be of any use to me in my spiritual journey? The fourth one is moderation. Moderation in everything. And Krishna says very nicely, Yuktahara viharasya, yukta cheshthasya karmasu, yukta swapnavabodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. He says moderation in everything becomes the destroyer of all sorrow. So, how do I practice it in my life? Once in a while, say no to whatever I want. If I want to eat ice cream every day, tell myself I will eat only Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays for a month and see what happens. If you are able to do that, what does it tell me? It will tell you whether you have control or not. And so, there is a saying in Malayalam that even nectar can become poison when given in excess. And that's why Krishna emphasizes moderation here. Yuktahara viharasya. Be moderate in everything. In your yuktahara, in eating, in recreation, in your entertainment, in your sleep, in your awakening time, everything you should have moderation. So that is the discipline. This covers the disciplines, the external disciplines. Then you have internal disciplines. This is the next 5-6 verses, verses 10 to 15 of the Gita. Krishna talks about what we call antaranga sadhanani, the disciplines necessary just before sitting for meditation. So some of the items to be taken care of. One is the place of meditation. It should be secluded, associated with spirituality, because that is a place where you come to every day, and therefore the association is very important for us. Whenever we sit down to meditate, automatically the association should be there. So there should be the picture of your Guru, of the Lord, of Ishtadevata. Should be a clean place. Should have a small little temple if possible over there, or altar. All these things are very important. So place of meditation is one. Then there is a time of meditation. And what time should we choose? We should choose a time when the mind is sattvic. Not rajasic, which is overactive, not tamasic, which is sleepy, but available to us, and is sattvic. And that is why normally we choose early morning, because the tamas of the body has been taken care of by the sleep of the night. And since we have just got up, we have not yet become active, so rajas has not yet started, so tamas has been exhausted, rajas has not begun, and therefore the mind is sattvic. This time we call as Brahma Muhurat. Usually we say 4 to 6 in the morning. It could be 3:30 to 5:30 in the morning. Essentially it means just after you have got up. And of course, it also means that you should be getting up early, before the world awakes. Then, there should be a proper seat. And Krishna says, the seat should not be on the floor, should not be on the bare ground, and should not be too high. He says it should be a seat exclusive to yourself. Don't share it with anybody. The seat should not be too high, should not be too low, should not be too hard, and should not be too soft. So, a few of the conditions given in how you should sit for meditation. Then it talks about the condition of the body. Sit down cross-legged if possible on your seat. Otherwise, though of course we talk about cross-legged in Shastras, if it's not possible, sit in a comfortable position, body, neck and head in one straight line, relaxed but not stiff. Then comes the condition of the sense organs. The eyes should be partially closed. So he says, as though looking through the eyes, not stressing it out, not getting cross-eyed, but as though looking through your eyes. So condition of the body, condition of the sense organs. Then condition of the mind or condition of breathing. The breathing should be smooth and slow. Should not be disturbed, jerky breathing. Why? Because breathing and the mind are interconnected. And as Ramana Maharshi says in Upadesha Saram, Vayu Rodhanat liyate manaha jala pakshavad rodha sadhanam. He says, just like a bird is prevented from movement by throwing a net over it, in the same way, your mind is prevented from movement if you control the breathing. So, breathing is an indirect technique to control the mind. So, just as a caged bird or a bird with the net over it cannot fly, pranayama will not allow the mind to fly everywhere. So, this important remedy is available to all of us, right? In fact, literally, it is under your nose, quite literally. Then there is condition of the mind. Become a sannyasi mentally. When you enter that corner or that room, which is a meditation room, become a sannyasi mentally. Which means when you enter the room, along with your slippers which you leave outside, leave everything, all your relationships also outside. For that half an hour where you're going to sit down and meditate, drop all your roles for a period of meditation. The person who should enter the meditation room is purely the seeker. Nobody else should be allowed to enter. All your other relationships have to be left outside the meditation room. So basically a mental withdrawal from all attachments of your life. That is a requirement before sitting for meditation. And then the last one is the condition of the intellect. The intellect should be convinced of the value of the meditation. And for that, a study of the scripture is important, because the time spent on meditation should be worth it in terms of the non-material benefits that I am going to get. And I should be aware of these non-material benefits, and I should be aware that there is a value for me in having these benefits. So intellect should also be adequately trained. Then the third major topic we said was Dhyana Swarupam, which is the nature of meditation. This is in some 13 verses, verse 18 to verse 32. And Krishna says, Yatha Deepo Nivatastaha Nengate Sopama Sprita Yoginam Yatachittasya Yunjato Yogam Atmanaha. So he says, the yogi who is practicing meditation, his mind can be thought of or compared to a lamp in a windless pot. So a lamp in a windless pot, the flame does not flicker at all. It is absolutely steady. And he is comparing the mind of the yogi engaged in meditation like this lamp which is not flickering at all. So mind is dwelling upon the nature of yourself. That mind is doing what? We remember this is Nidhi Dhyasanam. This is Vedantic meditation. So Vedantic meditation is directing the mind and dealing with the subject matter that I choose. And what is the subject matter? This is the subject matter that I have learned from the scriptures. What is that? In simple terms, I am consciousness, I am eternal, I am the truth, I am the only one, I am there everywhere, I am non-doer, I am non-experiencer, etc. Everything which Shastram has taught me, which Bhagavad Gita or which Vedanta has taught me about the scriptures, is the subject matter of this meditation. Right? And how do I do this? Remember that the mind has two important functions. One is recording and one is replaying. So Shravanam, listening to the record, listening to the teachings, is the recording. Nidhi Dhyasanam is the replacement. Is the replacement or the replaying of all these teachings. So here we are talking about three aspects: Dharana, Dhyanam and Samadhi. Dharana is focusing the mind on a subject, which is of course the subject of the teaching. Dhyanam is retaining the subject matter in my mind, and Samadhi is an absorption in the subject matter. Over the next 2-3 verses, Krishna gives 7 definitions of samadhi. So one he says is chitta uparamanam, mind is absorbed. Atma darshanam, mind is absorbed in what? In own nature. Atyantika sukham, extensive happiness, extensive bliss. Tattva nishtha, establishment in one's real own nature. Atyanta labha, highest benefit. And atyantika dukkha nivrittihi, freedom from sorrow of the highest order. And of course, a very famous definition, dukkha samyoga viyogaha, severance of the connection with pain. So he says, tam vidya dukkha sanyogaha, viyoga yoga sangitam. Understand that dukkha sanyogaha, the connection of the mind with sorrow, viyogam, the severance of that connection, yoga sangitam, that is called dhyana yoga. Then one more is dhyana phalam, the fourth topic. The main benefit is what? Of my getting nididhyasanam as a very established routine in my daily affairs. It means my knowledge has been assimilated completely. And therefore the main benefit becomes that I see sarvatra samadarshanam. I see everything as one, which means I am free from attachment and dislikes. I am free from likes and dislikes. I am not saying here that the person who has become a jnani has no likes and dislikes. The preferences will be there, but they are not compulsive. Remember, preferences are different from compulsions. And therefore I may have preferences for something or the other, but I can always act against those preferences, against those likes and dislikes. I am not a slave of any object, any situation, or any person. This is equanimity, poise of the mind. And how to achieve this? Krishna gives the technique. Yato yato nischarati manaschanchala asthiram tatastato niyamaitad atmanneva vasham nayet. Wherever the mind wanders, he tells Arjuna, why does the mind wander? Because this chalam and asthiram, it is moving all the time, it is unsteady. The very nature of the mind is to be unsteady and to be constantly restless, and therefore it will wander. From wherever it wanders, he says, from there bring it under the control of the intellect and back to the object of the concentration, which is what? Which is the teaching itself. Therefore, while you are focusing the teaching, you will find the mind wanders all over the place, which you have to accept because it is the nature of the mind to wander. And the whole practice of Upasana was to ensure that this mind does not wander anymore. And here is a reference to that. It's a small little reminder that even when you are doing this meditation, you might have an occasion where you see the mind has wandered. So gently bring it back to the teaching. This is the practice. The technical term is abhyasa, which Krishna talks about in this chapter and which Yoga Sutra also Patanjali mentions, abhyasa. So while on this subject, Krishna gives a very brief glimpse of another very important sadhana, devotion, bhakti. So he says, Yo mam pasyati sarvatra, sarvam cha mai pasyati, tasyaham na pranashyami, sachame na pranashyati. The one who sees me everywhere and everything in me, he says, I am never far away from him and he is never far away from me. So driving home the fact that this is nididhyasanam, and hence the teaching has to be dwelt upon constantly. And that is what he means. The one who sees me everywhere and also sees everything in me. Because nididhyasanam is what? Understanding whatever I have learned from the scriptures and recalling that, focusing on that again and again and again to mix the sugar in the coffee. Then there is another major portion, obstacles to meditation. This is verse number 33-36, and it gives both the obstacles as well as the remedies. This begins when Arjuna interjects in the middle. Krishna has been teaching and Arjuna has a doubt. So he says, Chanchalami mana Krishna pramati balavadridam tasyaham nigraham manye vayoriva sudushkaram. He says, hey Krishna, the mind is very fickle. It is very turbulent. It is very powerful and firm. And therefore, in my opinion, it is very difficult to restrain the mind, as difficult as it is to restrain the wind. So a description of the mind is being given here. Manaha chanchalam. The mind is highly active, wandering. And pramathi, restless. What is the problem with the mind being restless? If the mind alone is restless, it's not available to you. But not only that, whenever the mind is restless, the external expression of that unrest will be available at the verbal level and the physical level. So for example, when people are emotionally disturbed, what do? They either talk too much or they eat too much. They are available at physical levels. And some people, if you don't have anybody to talk to, when you are disturbed, you start talking to yourself. So not only does it affect the sense organ of speech, it affects all the other sense organs also. Supposing I am disturbed, the eyes are wandering, right? So if you are talking to somebody, how can you be sure that he is listening to you? Look at his eyes. If eyes are focused on you, then he is listening to you. But if the eyes are not focused on you, his mind has wandered. He may be physically there, but he is not listening to you at all. Okay. Then he says, Balavad. Balavad means powerful. So even though intellectually I may understand the futility of, say, worrying, right? Intellectually I know that by my worrying about something, I cannot change the outcome of that particular situation. Does that intellectual appreciation enable me to stop worrying? No, because the mind cannot be controlled so easily. It will continue to worry or be restless. And I can tell myself that I am eternal, I am Nirvikara Atma, I am the changeless Atman. But the butterflies in my stomach, they don't stop whenever I am faced with a situation. And that's why Balvat, this mind is extremely powerful. To control it is very difficult. So Arjuna is expressing very beautifully what is the nature of the mind. Then he says Dridam. It is firm. Firm in what? Dridam Balvad. It is firm in its determination to be completely restless. So it's like worrying is like a habitual pattern of thinking. Once, the first time you gave into worrying, it was a weakness. The next time you gave into worrying, that particular characteristic in you became stronger. And then again you gave in, and again you gave in. Now worrying has become a habit. And worry is a thought. And like any thought, the more I nourish it, the stronger it grows. And therefore you will find that some people worry for everything, others do not. It's as simple as how have you been nourishing that worrying thought. So worry is a habit, it's an acquired habit, and like any other acquired habit, it can be changed by reorienting the mind. It is not going to happen immediately. It takes time. It takes initiative. It takes planning. But it is the only way. You have to slowly, bit by bit, focus on your mind and change its pattern of thinking. Until then, dridam. It remains to be firm. It remains firm in its determination to be completely restless. And then Arjuna says, Tasya nigraham sudushkaram. Its control is going to be very difficult affair, hey Krishna. So tell me what to do. So, dushkaram means difficult. Sudushkaram means extremely difficult. And he says, Tasya nigraham. The control of that mind is just not difficult. It's extremely difficult. Like what? Vayoho eva. Like controlling the wind. I can't control the wind by just putting up my hand. And similarly, the mind is a very subtle, very powerful instrument. I cannot control the mind by just ordering it to stop worrying. So, what does Krishna do? He does not trivialize Arjuna's fears. he acknowledges that Arjuna's thoughts and fears, they are real. He says, yes, hey Arjuna. And he says, Asamshayam Mahabaho. Oh, without any doubt, hey Arjuna, Mano Durnigraham Chalam. Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena chagrahyate. Undoubtedly, Arjuna, the mind is very restless and extremely difficult to control. Krishna agrees. It is not an easy job at all. But he says, Arjuna, it can be mastered through what? Vairagyam, detachment, and abhyasa, practice. What is the problem with the mind? The main problem is this vikshepaha, this tendency to wander. And this problem is common across all of humanity. So he says, hey Mahabaho, even though you are powerful enough to conquer all your external enemies, Mahabaho means a person who is very strong. So he says, hey Arjuna, you are a very powerful person. You have conquered so many enemies, right? You have fought with Lord Shiva and come out very creatively. So that you are a very powerful warrior. But you do not have the inner strength to handle your mind as yet, which you must develop. That's why he says, Asamshayam. What you say, Arjuna, is most definitely true. That manaha durnigraham chalam. It's not easily manageable at all. But Arjuna, it is not impossible to handle. You must adopt the proper techniques for control of the mind. It is possible. What are they? Yoga Sutra Abhyasa also says, Patanjali says, Abhyasa Vairagya Bhyam. Through Abhyasa, practice, and through Vairagyam, you will be able to control the mind. Here also Krishna says, Abhyasena tu kaunteya Vairagyena. So there is a sequence, and both Krishna and Patanjali use the correct sequence. Abhyasa first, and Vairagyam is method number 2. So let us look at what is Abhyasa. The mind will always dwell upon anything without distraction. We all know, right? If the movie is interesting enough, we are all deaf and dumb, no thirst and no hunger. We are all in Nirvikalpa Samadhi. So everybody can get concentration if the object of concentration is pleasing for him. For some people, it is a good book. For some people, it can be a good movie. For some people, it can be cooking. For somebody else, it can be chess. And therefore, the learning is that if I develop an interest in a particular field, the mind will focus on that particular field very easily. And how do I develop an interest in a field? By knowing its value, by knowing how beneficial it is for me. So hence concentration, the ability to focus, requires me to understand the value of what I am focusing upon. And what is it here? It is the teaching itself. And therefore the value of the teaching has to be understood by me. And how do I understand the value of this teaching? By Shravanam and Mananam. By repeatedly hearing about it, by repeatedly reading about it, by repeatedly sharing with others. All this is about the study of the scriptures, depending upon the Lord as the only steady thing in my life, is the only worthwhile thing in my life. I must understand that dependence on any other factor is risky, because all factors are not predictable at all. And from this understanding, I go further into understanding that dependence upon Ishvara is something which I can rely upon, because Ishvara is a steady being in my life. And there's a further refinement. Depending upon Ishvara is ultimately depending upon myself, because the Lord is not different from me. I am not different upon the Lord. And therefore the scriptures talk about the journey in 3 installments, from world dependence to God dependence, from God dependence to self-dependence. And self-dependence is moksha. In fact, if you look at your past experiences, any time you have faced, let us say, you have had a bad time, you have faced sorrow, you will find that this sorrow has always come about because you have depended upon something which has not lived up to your expectations, and therefore I have depended upon something on which I should not have depended. Did not understand what is secure and what is not. So the Lord dependence, Ishvara dependence, God dependence is a habit which we can develop. It's a healthy habit. And therefore all religious life is nothing but developing healthy and good habits. Primary among them being dependence upon the Lord. And healthy habits have a very big advantage. They effortlessly replace unhealthy habits. So Gita class addiction is a very good addiction. It's an addiction, all right, but it is a healthy addiction. So it's called Shubhavasana. What is the advantage? Healthy addictions always displace unhealthy addictions in my life. What are unhealthy addictions? Emotional dependence upon people, upon things, upon events. These are the most unhealthy addictions in my life, unhealthy habits in my life, and they are called Ashubhavasana, inauspicious ways of thinking. This practice of meditation, this practice of Shravanam, Maranam and Nididhyasanam, the major thing that comes in the beginning is that I realize that there is separation between me and my mind. And because of this realization, I am able to see that every thought which I have is inside me. And it's a very important thing to understand. When every thought is inside me, I am able to see that I am not the thought. And that is the most important learning which I have from the meditation sadhana. There is a separation between me and my mind. There is a separation between me and my thoughts. And therefore, if I am having an angry thought, I need not be angry. If I am having a thought which is, let us say, depressive, I need not be depressed. So this is the separation. And looking at this, analyzing this again and again, this is abhyasa. And one of the most useful abhyasa, most useful practices in this particular sadhana is japa, the repetition of the mantra or the name of the Lord. What is the advantage? When I do japa, every subsequent thought is known to me in advance. I know what is my thought now. What is it? Let us say I am doing japa on Om Namo Narayana. I know that my current thought is Om Namo Narayana. I can predict that my next thought should also be Om Namo Narayana. The thought after that should also be Om Namo Narayana. This method of japa, it makes the entire process, every thought in that sequence of that 30 minutes or 45 minutes when I'm meditating, every thought is known to me in advance. And how is this different from the normal way we think? Because normally the mind moves at random. The next thought in your mind is not known to you at all until it actually comes. There is no predictability about thoughts in your mind. And therefore, japa is a very useful tool. It reverses that process. It makes every single thought for the period of the meditation known to you, predictable to you. That is why we say japa should never be given up. It is what is known as nitya karma, mandated action, not only for all karma yogis, but also for all sannyasis. And once you begin this practice, once you begin this abhyasa, you begin to get some understanding of the mind and begin to understand the processes of the mind. And at an advanced practice, interestingly, what is the problem with the mind? The mind gets distracted, we say. But as an advanced practice, as you grow in meditative techniques, as you grow in the focus of the sadhana, you can use the distraction of the mind as an object for meditation. It's a very useful, very interesting thing which Shankara has said elsewhere. That very distraction, to get rid of the distraction, you are doing this sadhana. But imagine when the focus of the mind is so complete that even the distraction fails to distract you. And therefore when the distraction comes, you use that distraction as an object of your meditation. So he says, yatra yatra mano yati, tatra tatra samadhayaha. So wherever the mind goes, whichever object it goes, what does Atmajnanam tell you? What does knowledge tell you? Knowledge tells you there is only one substance in this world, and that is Brahman. And if you are able to assimilate that completely, then during this Nididhyasanam process, even the distraction itself is Brahman. And therefore, yatra yatra mano yati, wherever the mind goes, tatra tatra samadhayaha. So samadhi is knowing that the focus on Brahman is there. So wherever you go, whichever object your mind wanders to, if you convert that object into its essence, which is Brahman, then there is no distraction at all, because Brahman is available everywhere. So a very beautiful little way of, an advanced technique. Once you are able to focus and understand that Brahman is there everywhere, then the mind itself begins to give up its distractions, because you have uncovered the technique of converting every distraction into an object of concentration. So once the practice of Abhyasa begins, we begin to slowly understand the true value of everything. And when that happens, Raga and Dvesha, likes and dislikes, they begin to lose their hold over me. And I have learnt to handle my likes and dislikes. And Krishna says, Shastra says that externally there are no enemies. Likes and dislikes are the only real enemies, and they are within you anyway. Any disturbances that arise in your life arises because of the hold of the Raga and Dvesha, because of the effect of likes and dislikes in your life. And if you are able to deal with that, where is the question of any disturbance at all? And the last topic is a different topic. It is based upon another question by Arjuna. So while going through this discussion, Arjuna suddenly feels that maybe he may not achieve moksha in this life. So he says, hey Krishna, kachinno bhaya vibhrashtaha chinna brahmiva nasyati apratishto mahabaho vimudo brahmana pathi. He says, hey Krishna, supposing I am not able to achieve this moksha in this life, even though I have practiced very faithfully, what is the consequence of that failure of that spiritual practice? I have not achieved moksha because I have failed in the practice in this life. Have I not wasted my entire life? So, look at it this way. Whoever comes to the spiritual path, there are only two possibilities. If he gets Atmajnanam and assimilates it, he gets moksha. If he does not get moksha, what happens? Because of the spiritual practice, he has generated a lot of good karma, what we call punyam. And because of that punyam, he will enter Swarga, heavens, and he will have a conducive birth to continue the spiritual journey from where he left off in the previous birth. So this is what Krishna tells him, that there is never a waste of a spiritual practice, because when you come back in the next life, supposing this life you do not manage to get moksha, when you come back in the next life, you are going to start from where you left off. It is not that you will start all over again. And you will get a conducive environment and you will start your journey from that point. So, do not give up any hope at all. There is never any, failure for a spiritual seeker. So, once you have got onto the spiritual escalator, there is only one way you can progress. Escalators don't go backwards, as you know. The spiritual path also takes you only forward. The only condition is get onto it. Once onto it, the escalator will take care of you. So with this, Krishna urges Arjuna to keep up the practice. And he glorifies meditation by saying, Yoginam api sarvesham madgaten tantaratmana shraddhavan bhajate mam same yukta tamo mataha. He says, even among all the dhyana yogis, all the faithful people who meditate upon me, with mind absorbed in me, that person I consider as the best among the yogis. Because there are meditators and meditators, but there is a person who is a meditator, which is Vedantic meditation. So faithful one who meditates upon me means he meditates upon my nature, which is no different from his nature. And once he is meditating upon the teachings, that person, for me, I consider him as the best yogi. So one who is practicing Nididhyasanam, he is the highest yogi because he is the closest to liberation. He has finished Shravanam, he has finished Mananam, and therefore he is only one step away from moksha. And therefore he says, hey Arjuna, may you meditate. And to summarize, meditation is not a means of moksha. Why? Because it is a result of the sadhana. Moksha is an already accomplished fact. It is only a matter for my owning that up and knowing that I am already free. And therefore we say Jnanat eva kaivalyam. Knowledge alone is the means of liberation. And therefore meditation is not prescribed for Atma Jnanam. Scriptures discuss very many different means of knowledge. There are 6 different pramanams, as they call it, means of knowledge. So inference is there, direct perception is there, comparison is there. But meditation is not enumerated anywhere there. And therefore meditation cannot be considered as a source of knowledge. Meditation is not even prescribed for any extraordinary experience or mystic experience. Why? Because all experiences, whether they are ordinary, extraordinary or mystic, where do they belong to? They belong to Anatma. They belong to the realm of the finite. And the realm of the finite is bound by space and bound by time. Because every experience, remember, ultimately deals with only the objective universe. The experiencer, the subject, therefore, can never become the object of experience. What then is the role of meditation? There are 2 roles, as I said earlier. One is Chitta Shuddhi Praptihi, the preparation of the mind for spiritual knowledge, refinement of the mind, getting what we call Jnana Yogyata, the preparation for coming to Jnanam. Then through Shravanam and Mananam, I get clear knowledge. Once I get clear and doubtless knowledge, Nididhyasanam, the second stage of meditation, will assimilate this knowledge, and there, once assimilated knowledge becomes available to me, it becomes available to me at the subconscious level also. And this is the second type of meditation which this chapter covers, Nididhyasanam. Once assimilation is done, what is the result? I am free from all internal problems. My mind is free from problems. My mind is undisturbed, irrespective of any external situation, which is what we call moksha or liberation. With this, I'll stop. Om Tat Sat. Thank you for your patience. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnam Eva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Bolo Sadguru Shivanand Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Bolo Swami Vishnu Devanand Maharaj Ki Jai. Om Tat Sat. Om Namah Shivaya. Please join me next week for a summary of chapter 7. Thank you for your patience.